She claimed no one would love a girl like her, but the CEO's amazing challenge changed everything. Annie Smith felt the weight of invisibility like a heavy coat that suffocated her daily. At 27, she was a receptionist at a prestigious law firm in a small Ohio town, caught between answering phones and filing paperwork while her spirit felt tethered to the earth. Her wild, curly hair and vibrant clothes often stirred whispers and glances that left her retreating further into herself. Memories of foster care replayed in her mind, the time she had longed for love and acceptance, a place where she could truly belong, always seeming to slip through her fingers like sand. Love felt so far away, and her dreams of being an artist, unreasonable in a job like this, felt even further. On a chilly morning, golden leaves fluttered outside the firm's large windows as Mike Johnson, the dynamic CEO, made an announcement that sent ripples across the room. "We're launching a competition for a new marketing campaign." His voice rang with enthusiasm, igniting excitement among the staff. Yet for Annie, the sounds of chatter became a distant hum, like she was underwater. Her dreams were too lofty to pursue. Who was she to think she could make a mark here? It was safer to remain unnoticed, to hover behind the reception desk, avoiding scrutiny. Taking a lunch break, she cradled a steaming cup of coffee, its warmth grounding her. Memories of her grandmother's words about resilience and worth echoed in her mind, nudging her to reevaluate whether she truly belonged to this world. A flicker of desire to showcase her hidden knack for graphic design ignited, yet soon that flame was overshadowed by an all-too-familiar claw of self-doubt. "Just stick to reception, Annie," she imagined her colleagues sneering as her heart sank deeper into insecurity. Before she could entertain her newfound momentum, her hopes were crushed. A senior designer, someone with years of experience, dismissed her creations, absorbing her designs for the competition as if they were theirs. This confrontation loomed over her like a dark cloud. The loyalty she felt toward a firm that overlooked her potential wrestled violently against her right to protect her stolen artistry. Annie's thoughts raced as she paced the small break room, tension knotting in her stomach, her breathing irregular. She wanted to scream, to confront them, to demand recognition, but fear anchored her to the floor, stifling her resolve. As she hovered on the brink of breaking, Mike unexpectedly stepped in, noticing the brilliance peeking through her doubts. His mentorship unfolded a connection she had never anticipated, stirring something inside her that she thought was lost, a sense of belonging, a flicker of hope. Together, they fueled the flames of her creativity, and with every design she crafted, her belief in herself began to bloom. Yet, as the final presentation loomed near, her heart hammered with dread. Would her work be enough to earn her respect? Would she finally emerge from the shadows, or would the world continue to label her as merely the receptionist? The memory of her grandmother's words urged her to push through the suffocating doubts. She stood at a precipice, feeling the world shrink into an abyss of uncertainty. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. With the judges preparing to announce the winner, Annie stood paralyzed. Could she really reclaim her worth and finally embrace the acceptance that felt so tantalizingly out of reach? Doubt gnawed at her thoughts, a relentless whisper telling her she would never be enough. The weight of it all pressed heavily on her heart, bringing her to a breaking point. Would she bend under the pressure or soar in her moment of truth? In that fraught silence, Annie mirrored her internal storm, caught between the exhilarating potential of recognition and the fear that she might never escape the confines of anonymity. Annie's heart raced in tandem with the countdown of the ticking clock in the room. Each second felt like an eternity as she stood on the cusp of something monumental, but the darkness of doubt threatened to eclipse her moment. Gathering her resolve, she forced herself to recall the hours spent poring over her designs, molding vague ideas into shapes that resonated with her emotional truth. They weren't just drawings, they were echoes of her soul. Suddenly, she felt the urge to step forward, to assert herself beyond the receptionist's counter. A flurry of voices murmured, each one adding to the cacophony echoing in her mind. The senior designer who had stolen her ideas loomed in her thoughts like a specter, embodying all the reasons she had felt unworthy. Yet Mike's belief in her bore down on her like a lighthouse piercing through dense fog, guiding her back to shore. Could she allow her insecurities to dictate her fate any longer? The announcement began, resonating like church bells in the silence of her mind. Each name echoed with a weight greater than the last. But when her turn arrived, she took a breath, a long, cleansing inhale that filled her lungs and voided her fears. Annie Smith, the judge articulated, their tone buoyant yet formal. As she stepped into the spotlight, an unfamiliar confidence surged through her. The weight of expectation morphed into a palpable energy coursing through her veins. With each word that left her lips about her design, she painted a vivid picture for the audience. Rather than simply explaining her artwork, she revealed the emotions behind her choices. The fluttering leaves outside the office, the unique colors that mirrored her chaotic but beautiful journey. She could feel the fascination in the audience's eyes. There was a shift. They began to see her not just as the receptionist, but as a creator, a storyteller carving her niche within the firm's narrative. As she concluded her presentation, Annie held her breath, waiting for validation. The judges conferred, laughter peppering their serious tones. For a fleeting moment, doubt clawed at her again, whispering she wasn't worthy of this moment. But then she remembered her grandmother's unwavering belief in her talent, the lessons in resilience that had carved her path to this point. This was more than a design competition. It was her reclamation of self-worth, an assertion of her right to be seen. When the winner was announced, the room erupted in applause. Though the title went to someone else, the realization that her voice had resonated so clearly was intoxicating. She had carved her presence into the firm's tapestry, her future suddenly alight with possibilities. Mike approached her, a proud smile dancing across his face, confirming what she had wished for, that her talent had shone brightly enough to earn its place in the professional world. The weeks following were a whirlwind. Annie began taking on small projects, each time stepping further into her role as a graphic designer rather than a shadowed receptionist. The whispers hadn't faded completely, but they grew quieter, lost amid the new conversations where her name was pronounced with respect. Yet, as her confidence blossomed, so did the scrutiny. Some colleagues viewed her rise as a threat, their dismissive comments lingering in her mind. One evening, amid the glow of her desk lamp, Annie found herself at yet another crossroads. She had been invited to submit her designs to a national competition, but faced unease at the thought of rejection from a larger audience. Should she open herself to the possibility of failure, risking the hard-won ground she had covered? The clock ticked softly around her, echoing the urgency of her decision. Annie caught her reflection in the glass, seeing a spark of determination she scarcely recognized. She was no longer just a girl from her past. She was an architect of her future. As she prepared to hit send on her submission, the moment felt monumental, an audacious leap into the unknown that whispered, "This is just the beginning." But as the countdown on her dreams commenced, a notification pinged, revealing an unexpected message from the senior designer who had brushed her off earlier. It was a request for collaboration on a new campaign, a hand extended across the divide. Turmoil flooded her thoughts. Could she trust them after what had transpired, or was this an attempt to undermine her newfound confidence? Annie found herself drawn into a storm of conflicting emotions, teetering at the edge of a pivotal choice that could either cement her growth or drag her back into the shadows. In that moment, she wondered, could she forge a new relationship with someone who had once discredited her? The path ahead was uncertain, but it loomed larger than her fears. Would she dismiss the request and solidify her autonomy, or would she seize the opportunity for collaboration, testing the fragility of her newfound self-worth? The decision awaited her, heavy and electrifying. The silence stretched in her mind, suffocating yet liberating. Annie stared blankly at the glowing screen, the weight of the message feeling heavier than the digital words it held. Could she really consider working with someone who had once belittled her creative essence? Her instinct screamed for caution, a whisper of self-protection echoing in the chambers of her mind. But as she let the notion swirl in her thoughts, another voice surfaced, the part of her that had tasted a hint of success and was desperate for more. She hesitated before typing an answer, fingers hovering above the keyboard. What if this collaboration could serve as a bridge, allowing her to connect with the very world that had previously shunned her? Perhaps it was a chance to explore her boundaries, to redefine the narrative written about her. Yet the specter of betrayal loomed large in her mental landscape. Glaring reminders of how she felt diminished flooded her senses at the thought of being vulnerable again, trusting again. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she resolved to respond, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Thank you for your message. I'd be interested, but I think we should discuss some terms first." With that, she pressed send, feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with unease. In the days that followed, the anticipation of the upcoming meeting enveloped her like a fog. She prepared meticulously, pouring herself into researching current campaigns and gathering ideas. As she walked into the meeting room on the day of their collaboration, her heart pounded in her chest. The glow of her laptop screen felt like the spotlight she had once occupied, a beacon illuminating both her vulnerabilities and her strengths. The senior designer, Jessica, greeted her with a tight smile. There was an air of tension, an unspoken weight hanging between them. But Annie had determined to approach this with an iron grip on her resolve. "Thank you for inviting me to collaborate. I appreciate this opportunity," she began, her voice steadier than her racing heart. Jessica nodded, a hint of surprise flitting across her features. "I know things have been rocky between us, but I think we can create something great together, if we can move past that." Good morning, everyone. Today, we're excited to showcase our latest marketing campaign, which was designed to resonate with an audience seeking authenticity and trust, she started, her voice echoing against the sterile walls. Each word hung heavily in the air, and Annie fought to maintain the facade of confidence. Just as she launched into the details of the campaign theme, she felt the familiar pang of doubt creep in, threatening to derail her focus. Would they see her for who she really was? Did her ideas hold enough weight to carry them forward? But then, in the sea of uncertainty, a small flicker of defiance ignited within her, a flicker she wouldn't allow to be extinguished. This campaign is not just about selling a product, it's about inviting our audience to be part of the conversation, she continued, locking eyes with the CEO, who sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his gaze all business. His presence radiated authority, but she sensed a spark of curiosity beneath his stern demeanor. Annie took a deep breath, pressing forward. As she unveiled her ideas, the world around her began to blur into the background. Her nervousness gave way to passion, fueling her drive to communicate. She outlined innovative strategies to connect with their target demographic, focusing not just on persuasion, but genuine engagement. Each slide seemed to resonate with the room, with murmurs of interest punctuating the air. Jessica chimed in with supportive insights, and Annie felt a bond form as they navigated the tensions of their past. They were collaborators now, architects of a shared vision, and Annie found strength in the camaraderie. Sharing the spotlight, rather than merely enduring the shadows, sparked an intoxicating sense of purpose. Yet, as the questions from the CEO began to flow, Annie's heart raced. He probed deeper, testing not just the viability of her ideas, but the essence of her character. "Annie, do you think people will truly resonate with this narrative? Can you defend the authenticity you're proposing?" A bead of sweat trickled down her spine. Fear threatened to catch her off guard. But then, amidst the chaos, an unexpected revelation surged forward. The truth was in her experience. She recalled late-night brainstorming sessions, the thrill of an idea that ignited for the first time, and the voice that lived within her, resistant to being quieted. "Yes, I do," she replied, her voice steady, "because it's built on honesty, something our audience craves." There it was, a realization about her own worth. Annie had been on her journey, navigating through doubt and self-sacrifice, but in this moment she understood her resilience. Success was no longer something she craved desperately. It was an assurance that she could share her authentic voice without fear. The conversation flowed into deeper strategy, and Annie felt her confidence swell with each passing moment. She had faced her fears, learned to challenge herself, and now stood firm against the remnants of her past. When the presentation concluded, applause enveloped her, an unexpected wave of affirmation. It felt powerful, affirming, yet shadows of doubt lingered. As the team wrapped up, the CEO leaned closer. "You certainly surprised me today, Annie," he stated, eyes narrowing in thought. "How about leading a team in a bigger project? I could use someone willing to challenge the norm." His words washed over her with a thrilling mixture of intimidation and exhilaration. Could she actually accept this challenge, stepping further into the light? A new wave of uncertainty gripped her. Was she ready to lead, to push the boundaries of her own capabilities? Annie's heart raced, not out of fear, but anticipation. Before she could respond, Jessica nudged her, giving a knowing smile. The camaraderie they forged reoriented the narrative in Annie's mind. This partnership could blossom, but it would also test her tenacity. Annie paused, the implications of the offer sinking in. What lay ahead demanded more than she had ever envisioned. Clenching her jaw, she leaned closer to the CEO, ready to respond, knowing that each choice could define her professional journey. What lay ahead was a defining moment. Would she seize this unexpected opportunity or retreat back into the safety of self-doubt? The ground beneath her shifted as she stood, poised at the brink of a transformative choice. Annie's heart pounded in her chest, each thump echoing the uncertain rhythm of her thoughts. The CEO's words hung heavy in the air, a challenge wrapped in intrigue. Leading a larger project? The idea sent adrenaline coursing through her veins, yet it was counterbalanced by a tidal wave of trepidation. She had never thought of herself as a leader. She spent years reinforcing the narrative of self-doubt. The prospect of wearing that new identity felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Absolutely," she finally uttered, forcing the words out against her apprehensions. The moment they left her lips, a rush of boldness surged within her. There was no room for half measures now. She had to embrace the unfamiliar. She would not retreat. The CEO nodded, a hint of satisfaction crossing his face. "Good. Let's sit down next week and discuss this further," he said, before turning back to the group, leaving Annie with her racing thoughts. Surrounded by colleagues, Annie felt a sudden connection with Jessica, sharing an unspoken understanding that their paths were about to intertwine in new ways. Yet, as the adrenaline subsided, doubt began lurking at the edges of her mind. What experience did she have in leading a team? Would she be able to inspire them? She could envision the faces of her future teammates, expectant, inquisitive, perhaps even skeptical. Could she rise to fill the role they needed? In the days that followed, Annie found herself diving into preparation for her newly appointed role. Each morning began with a regimen of research and brainstorming, pouring herself into the project. At home, she scribbled notes and sketches on the back of napkins, the ideas flowing like a torrent of creativity that previously felt stifled. However, with each step forward came the haunting question, what if this was all a mistake? Conversely, what if this was her chance to prove to herself that she was capable? What if leading her team could redefine who she was? The duality persisted, eating away at her peace of mind. On the next Monday morning, Annie entered the office with a determined stride, clutching a stack of papers that constituted her preliminary strategies. It felt surreal. This was her project now, and no one could take that away. The team gathered in a modest conference room, a far cry from the pristine chamber where she'd presented her campaign. As she laid out her vision, Annie noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Though there were still skeptical faces, others leaned in, intrigued by what she had to offer. She introduced fresh ideas, woven with elements of authenticity that had driven her initial presentation. Yet, even as excitement crackled in the air, the shadow of self-doubt loomed ever larger. Once the meeting adjourned, Annie lingered behind, noting Jessica's hesitant expression. "That was a solid start, but they need to see the real you leading this," Jessica advised, her voice a mixture of encouragement and caution. "You're not just an echo of our last campaign, you're an innovator." Annie contemplated the weight of those words, realizing that it was not just the project that hung in the balance. It was her evolution into a leader, her chance to push against the very boundaries she had spent years constructing. "What if I'm not enough?" she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jessica stepped closer, her expression serious. "What if you are? You have to believe that you bring something unique. Lean into your strengths. This is where it truly begins." With that simple reminder, Annie's thoughts began to crystallize. The project was more than just a bid for her career. It was an opportunity for self-discovery. Could she infuse the strategy with authenticity at a level that resonated not just with the audience, but also with her team? That afternoon, Annie sat down with a blank sheet of paper, ready to draft her vision manifesto and confront the doubts that had lingered too long. The challenge before her was not merely professional, it demanded a confrontation with her own insecurities. Suddenly, a message popped up on her screen, a meeting invitation from the CEO, titled "Next Steps." As apprehension flickered within her, she recognized that his faith in her led deeper than mere project leadership. It was also a challenge to confront herself. Gripping the pen tightly, she took a deep breath and wrote, "This is only the beginning." What awaited her at the meeting would require all her resolve. Would she uncover a measure of strength that solidified her new identity? Or would the shadows of doubt creep back into focus as she faced the CEO again? The clock ticked ominously, reminding her that time was running out. Annie's heart raced as she approached the meeting room, the invitation lingering in her mind like a heavy weight. Today was not just about discussing the project, it was about practicalizing a version of herself that had been shrouded in self-doubt for far too long. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by the CEO and several team members. His expression reflected both expectation and curiosity, as if he were eager to unveil her potential rather than just evaluate her proposals. "Annie, I'm glad you're here. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the next steps," he began. The words flowed like a current, pulling her into the moment. Taking a seat at the head of the table, Annie reminded herself of Jessica's advice. This was her opportunity to showcase not just ideas, but her authenticity. She opened her folder, revealing the vision manifesto she had feverishly drafted. Through the presentation, she felt the tension rise and fall in the room. Outlined strategies merged her passion with calculated approaches that defined the objectives. Questions sprung forth from her colleagues, and Annie experienced a strange blend of anxiety and exhilaration. Each inquiry challenged her to defend not only her plan, but her right to lead it, And for the first time, she recognized her capacity to rise to that challenge. Responding with conviction, she turned questions into dialogues, allowing her team to see her thought process. A simmering confidence began to emerge, pulling clarity from the depths of her hesitance. But with each moment of clarity came new doubts. What if they saw through her facade? After all, in the recess of her mind, the voice of that uncomfortable self-doubt chanted incessantly, "You're not a leader, you're an imposter." By the meeting's end, it felt like a breakthrough had occurred. The CEO smiled, acknowledging not just the plan, but her growth within the role. "I'm impressed, Annie," he declared. "I see potential here, not just in the project, but in you as a leader. Let's keep the conversation going." As the meeting adjourned, the sense of victory was intoxicating. This was a significant pivot. Transmitting her inner turmoil into something tangible felt like emerging from the shadows. Her colleagues expressed enthusiasm for the ideas she shared, a positive reception that felt both surreal and exhilarating. Yet, as the glow of accomplishment faded, the familiar spiral of doubt began anew. Was this rise to leadership merely a culmination of circumstance? Were they responding to her suggestions or to the vulnerability she had finally dared to expose? That evening, she found herself staring at the blank screen of her laptop, fingers poised yet hesitant. This project represented a milestone, a desire to craft a narrative where she was no longer a passive observer in her career, but a principal architect. But was she capable of guiding others? She recalled the skepticism that had flickered across her teammates' faces earlier that day. Lurking reassurance pricked her with feelings of inadequacy, threatening to drag her back. She resisted the urge to retreat, instead channeling that energy into a hot, heavy resolve. What if she dared to confront that skepticism directly? It was time to not just gather thoughts on paper, but to galvanize the thoughts of others. Her vision expanded, a workshop aimed at gathering feedback not just on the project, but also on her leadership style. If she was to lead, she needed to engage her team in a dialogue rather than dictate a vision. With renewed determination, she began drafting comprehensive plans for the workshop, eyes glimmering with unexpected excitement. This was going to be not just about the project, but about forging connections, confronting skepticism, and empowering one another. It was both a risk and an opportunity for her team to invest in their vision collectively, a true collaboration. Suddenly, another notification pinged, disrupting her thoughts. A follow-up meeting had been scheduled with the CEO, but this time it was to discuss her ideas for the workshop. "Prepare for excitement and vulnerability," she whispered to herself, almost as if she needed to remind the voice of doubt that first glimpses of confidence had begun to bloom. As Annie began pacing her apartment, ambition unfurling like an origami butterfly emerging from a tight fold, she realized this was not merely about leading a project. It was defining a path for herself, shaping how she wanted to engage with possibility. With each detail outlined, she felt a magnetic draw toward the most vital confrontation, facing her fears of inadequacy. Was she capable of leading this initiative, of delivering on her design? In this moment of clarity, she mused, what if this transforms everything? No answer emerged, but one vertex sparkled before her, igniting a hunger for proof. Annie was set to carve her own narrative, but at what cost? Every path forward promised both growth and fear. The moment was at hand where she would risk it all, bah humbug on the doubts. But what if she stumbled instead? Would the start of her leadership coincide with a fall from grace? Her next meeting would be pivotal. The personal stakes were higher than before. Now it was more than just execution. What lay ahead was a crucible, testing her newfound commitment to authenticity. "Time to step into the unknown," she declared softly to herself, a thrilling determination coursing through her. She took a deep breath, feeling the walls of her anxieties shake as she leaned into the promise of change. Would she emerge refined, embracing her role as a genuine leader, or would the weight of her insecurities once more hold her captive? Annie glanced at her reflection in the mirror, where the determination in her eyes momentarily eclipsed the familiar flicker of doubt. The follow-up meeting with the CEO loomed before her, a gaping chasm that she could either leap over or fall into. She tightened her grip on the folder filled with her workshop plans, its edges biting into her palm as if tethering her to the ground. As she arrived at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation. Her colleagues moved through the open space with purpose, their laughter and casual chatter underscored by a sense of eagerness tied to her initiative. This was both thrilling and terrifying. How could she galvanize this energy into a constructive force when her own heart raced with uncertainty? "Annie, excited for your meeting?" Jessica's voice broke her thoughts, and she offered a wan smile, aware of her friend's unwavering support. "I think it's going to be amazing. You've got this." The encouragement bolstered her confidence, yet the relentless whisper of doubt countered. "Do you really? Can you handle being the center of it all?" Entering the meeting room, she felt the familiar mix of anxiety and anticipation in her gut. The CEO sat at the head of the table, a serene yet commanding presence. "Good morning, Annie. I was looking forward to discussing your workshop ideas. Have you thought about how you'd approach the team?" Annie felt the weight of all eyes on her, but instead of retreating, she focused on the collective energy. "Thank you for this opportunity. I intend to create an environment where everyone feels safe sharing their thoughts, not just about the project, but about how we can enhance our collaboration as a team." She glanced around the room, watching as her colleagues lean in slightly, intrigued by her shift in tone. "What do you mean by safe?" the CEO prompted. As she met his gaze, a calmness washed over her. This was her moment to delineate a future where vulnerability became a strength rather than a liability. "I want to foster an open dialogue. We often skip over discussions about leadership styles or feedback systems, but these are critical tools for our growth. If I can show my own uncertainties, perhaps they'll feel empowered to voice theirs as well." A murmur of assent rippled through the room, unexpected and invigorating. The CEO nodded contemplatively. "Interesting. So you're suggesting that authenticity in leadership creates a space for others to share and grow?" "Yes," she affirmed, her voice growing steadier. "I believe so. Leadership isn't just about guiding, it's about courageously showing our paths, including our doubts. It allows others to connect on a human level." He absently leaned back, his fingers steepling thoughtfully. "It sounds like an ambitious venture, Annie. But let me ask, why do you think your vulnerability will resonate?" She hesitated only for a moment as the raw truth surged through her. "Because I've realized that we're all grappling with something beneath the surface, be it fear, doubt, or insecurity. I want to challenge those feelings openly. It's time we embrace our shared struggles instead of hiding behind our roles." As she spoke, the burden of her self-doubt lightened with every word. Yes, she was unsure, but acknowledging that uncertainty was part of the journey. It struck her then that her struggles were not signs of weakness, but vessels of connection. "Sounds like it could reshape our team dynamics, Annie." The CEO shifted forward, interest piqued. "How do you plan to address the potential resistance?" The question hung in the air, a palpable challenge. Would her team really welcome such openness? She considered the array of personalities she would engage: the skeptics, the visionaries, those wary of change. "I plan to introduce interactive sessions where everybody can share experiences. Each concern might unveil new perspectives about collaborating more effectively. We might even engage in role reversal activities, where we step into each other's shoes. It's about empathy." As determination surged within, she reveled in the shift from doubt to conviction. These ideas were not merely platitudes, they were tools capable of transforming the working environment into something meaningful. The CEO gazed at her with a mixture of intrigue and respect. "Annie, consider me on board," he said with a slight grin. "Let's explore how we can facilitate this together." Annie felt a surge of triumph mixed with a lingering tension. She had stepped into a new narrative, but what awaited her was still uncertain territory. Could she truly cultivate this authenticity among her peers? Would her efforts lead to a cultural shift within their organization? Leaving the meeting room, her mind reeled with a cacophony of thoughts, both invigorating and intimidating. She had uncovered a powerful vision, yet now the true work lay ahead. That evening, as she closed her laptop, an unexpected weight bubbled beneath her excitement. The approach to the workshop would demand more than strategies. It would require resilience and relentless courage to face whatever pushback awaited her. Annie resolved. This wasn't merely about leading project conversations anymore. This was about embracing an evolution in herself and her team. Suddenly, inspiration struck like a spark. What if their first session included a personal sharing moment, where everyone brought an object that represented their leadership style? That could create a space for authenticity and connection. "Time to outline the next steps," she muttered, fueled by curiosity and determination. Yet unease simmered beneath her excitement. What if her workshop failed to ignite that spark? What if she, once again, lingered on the edge of potential without stepping boldly into the fray? Annie knew she had to confront these fears head-on as she forged ahead. The moment had come to turn doubt into discovery, but would she be able to illuminate the darkness that had often clouded her journey? As she prepared for this next chapter, the answer evaded her, settling into a veil of unsettling anticipation. What awaited her at the intersection of authenticity and leadership? She took a deep breath, ready to embrace the challenge. Annie woke the next morning with clarity that sharpened her resolve. Each idea she had penned the night before shimmered with possibility. Slipping into her favorite blazer, she felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. This was more than clothing, it was armor for the battlefield of ideas she would soon meet. At the office, the atmosphere buzzed more energetically than the day before. Colleagues' conversations resonated with optimism, and their enthusiasm flowed toward Annie like an electric current. Excitement mingled with her nerves as she prepared to unveil her concepts, knowing full well how pivotal today could be. As the hour approached, anxiety crept in alongside anticipation. Had she prepared enough? Would they relate to her vision? What if her conclusions fell flat? She took a moment, closing her eyes against the ambient noise of the workspace, breathing deeply to ground herself. "Hey, you look like you have a lot on your mind," Jessica said, breaking through Annie's moment of introspection. "Remember, communication is key. Just show them your passion." Annie appreciated her friend's reminder, but felt the weight of her expectations. Her passion had to translate into structured plans, ensuring her vision manifested into something tangible. "Right, but I also have to lead them through their doubts, and I'll be doing that without a script." Jessica's reassuring smile encouraged her to forge onward. It wasn't just about presenting her materials, it was about unlocking a deeper understanding of collaboration and its intrinsic bond with authenticity. The workshop room was furnished with a round table, an intentional choice that encouraged dialogue. Annie scanned the faces of her team as they entered, some curious, others skeptical. Each represented a spectrum of leadership philosophies she hoped to engage. "Welcome, everyone," her voice rang out, stronger than she anticipated. "Today, we embark on a journey of vulnerability and leadership exploration." She felt the warmth of anticipation ebbing from the group, its edges pierced by her open demeanor. How many of you feel like discussing your leadership styles can be a bit daunting? Some tentative hands rose, a gentle wave of agreement that pulsed across the room. Exactly, it can be a struggle, but together we're going to create a safe space, starting now. With her heart pounding, she introduced the personal sharing activity. "Everyone, please take a moment to share an object that represents your leadership style. Let's explore the invisible connections that tie us as a team." The first participant, Tom, a no-nonsense lead engineer, presented a weathered compass, explaining how it symbolized his desire to guide others even amid uncertainty. The room hung on his words. Each contribution built on the last, steadily dissolving barriers once thick with doubt. As discussions deepened, Annie noticed a shift, a palpable change in energy. With each shared story, anonymity was stripped away, revealing the shadows of vulnerability beneath polished facades. Colleagues who had once been distant found strength in shared experiences. Then came Morgan, the team's most vocal skeptic. "I'll admit, I thought this would be fluff," he began, glaring at the wooden object he chose, a broken watch. "But I've realized maybe my tendency to micromanage stems from my own fear of letting time slip away. Hearing all of you today makes me reconsider." The room grew silent, absorbing his honesty. Annie's heart fluttered. She had feared resistance, and yet here was transformation unfurling before her eyes. She knew she was instigating something crucial. Her vision was morphing into a collective reality that stirred emotions even in the most resistant of her peers. As the session progressed, she felt exhilarated too. The workshop wasn't just a formality, it was a narrative taking shape, a testament to the power of connection. Each revelation sparked a desire to dive deeper. Now, the real challenge loomed on the horizon. "Thank you for your bravery today. For our next session, let's explore how we can implement this newfound understanding into actionable strategies," she encouraged, feeling hope swell within her. But as she soaked in her team's collective growth, an undercurrent of anxiety flickered, a realization that there was no going back. This would test her ability to sustain this authenticity amid potential pushback in the future, a vulnerability she had now invited into the workplace culture. Would she be able to sustain this momentum when self-doubt knocked on the door again? And how would her counterparts truly respond as the chat shifted from personal to practical? Annie paused, feeling the gravity of anticipation settle around her. The groundwork had been laid, but now she faced the monumental task of keeping the flame alive. With vulnerability at its core, what would the next step in this journey of transformative leadership entail? As the days unfolded after the workshop, Annie felt an insistent buzz of responsibility. The conversations she had ignited began to settle into the team's psyche, but the question loomed large. How could she keep the momentum going? She sensed that her peers had tasted something potent, an awakening, but now it was on her shoulders to sustain that spark. Annie approached her desk with trepidation, aware that the aftermath of inspiration often wrestled with apathy. As she scrolled through emails, she noticed one from the CEO, an invite for a casual coffee chat. The question caught her off guard. Why the interest in her opinions now? She brushed off the doubts. This was a chance to advocate for the evolution she envisioned. Meeting in a plush corner of the cafe, her palms felt slick against the ceramic mug. The CEO, Elizabeth, was shrewd, with a reputation for cultivating talent. "Annie," she began, her voice smooth yet probing, "I hear the workshop has stirred some innovative ideas among the team. What's your vision moving forward?" Annie inhaled deeply. This was her moment. "I believe we can implement regular dialogue sessions, creating a rhythm of vulnerability and understanding. If we can engage all levels of the organization in this transformative leadership conversation, we can create a culture built on trust." Her voice shook slightly, her confidence wavering as she shared her aspirations. Elizabeth leaned back, her eyes narrowing with keen evaluation. "And how do you plan to counteract skepticism that may surface, especially from those who were resistant in our last meeting?" The echo of Morgan's skepticism resonated in Annie's memory. I believe we need to acknowledge those doubts, she replied. It's about accepting that transformation is a process, not a magic fix. By integrating feedback and adapting our discussions, we create a space where those fears are addressed directly. The CEO nodded slowly, contemplatively. Do you think you have the bandwidth to lead this initiative? It's one thing to work within your team. It's another to elevate this to the entire organization. The weight of expectation hung over Annie, forcing her to confront an unsettling truth. She had entered a realm where her actions had consequences beyond her immediate environment. A moment of vulnerability flickered within her spirit. I'm willing to take on this challenge. I want to see all of us evolve, but I may need support from leaders like you to bolster this dialogue as it scales. Elizabeth smiled, a glimmer of intrigue reflected in her gaze. All right, Annie, I'll back you. But remember, entrepreneurship isn't just about grand visions. It requires resilience against real-world complaints and pushbacks. You'll need to cultivate allies along the way, trustworthy voices who can advocate for your work. Annie felt both a thrill and a tinge of fear at the notion of rallying support. There was danger in exposing her ambitions. How steadfast would she remain against resistance? As she navigated the conversation, she discerned the complexities of leading beyond her team, unsure if she was prepared to rise to the higher calling thrust upon her. After a lengthy discussion filled with strategic exchanges, Annie departed with a renewed sense of purpose. Yet beneath that exhilaration lay an unsettling depth of self-doubt. Could she truly pivot the entire organization towards a leadership evolution? Were her ideas substantial enough to withstand the scrutiny of peers she had only begun to unite? As she walked back to her desk, Annie felt the pulse of challenge tightening within her. The seeds of self-discovery had been sown, but the waters of implementation were turbulent. Would she find the resilience necessary, or would indulgence in self-doubt shatter her aspirations? Returning to her office, she opened her laptop, the screen glaring back with a surging list of next steps. What emerged was not merely a strategy, it was the quest for her own transformation as a leader. Could she become the advocate her concept needed? The demands of her new role would test every ounce of resolve she had uncovered. A heavy decision loomed on the horizon, choosing her allies carefully, confronting opinions head-on, and developing a roadmap that would carry her vision into the foreground. With an unexpected resurgence of determination, she initiated an outline of a larger initiative, each bullet point an embodiment of resilience. But as she prepared to execute her plans, a nagging question licked at the back of her mind. Would she be ready for the inevitable confrontation that remained ahead? Would she consume her doubts, or would they consume her? The moment of truth was fast approaching. Would she manage to elevate her vision into lasting change, or would she falter as the inevitable resistance came knocking at her door? Annie stood facing her colleagues, the echoes of the recent workshop still reverberating in her mind. The energy had shifted. It was palpable. Yet, as she prepared to take the next steps towards leadership, she felt once more the tug of self-doubt. But this time was different. She had learned to embrace vulnerability and authenticity as powerful instruments of change. Today, we begin to cultivate an ongoing dialogue, not just within our team, but across the entire firm. She addressed her peers, her voice steady. The skepticism she had encountered before now felt distant, each encounter a stepping stone that had bolstered her resolve. The first phase of her initiative would roll out in a series of team-building workshops. Their purpose? To reinforce the environment of trust and open communication established weeks prior. Each gathering would allow her colleagues to voice concerns, share experiences, and brainstorm solutions. Annie's heart raced in anticipation. This was no longer merely an idea confined to her personal aspirations. It had evolved into a shared mission. Weeks passed, and with each workshop, Annie reveled in the collaborative spirit that flourished. Colleagues began to engage in discussions that stretched beyond their usual topics.
They tackled challenges and proposed fresh ideas together, energizing the atmosphere with enthusiasm and creativity. But there were bumps along the way. Some doubted the effectiveness of this approach, voices in meetings countering her ideals with skepticism. Yet, instead of retreating, Annie found herself equipped with the resilience she had fought so hard to cultivate. What's the worst that could happen, she asked herself each time doubt reared its head. I may just learn something. In one particularly contentious meeting, Morgan, once the echo of doubt herself, expressed concern about time management, arguing that personal stories took too long to relay in busy professional environments. Instead of shrinking back, Annie leaned into the discomfort of the moment. I appreciate your point, Morgan, she replied, struggling to suppress her own uncertainties. But the time we invest in understanding each other manifests in a tighter-knit team, which ultimately saves time on productivity. This is about cultivating efficiency through genuine connection. To her surprise, others began to rally around her perspective, engaging in a constructive back and forth that showcased the very essence of collaboration they had been working to foster. And through this process, Annie demonstrated her ability to defend a vision not just through passion, but with well-reasoned practicality. Months later, during a pivotal quarterly meeting, the CEO acknowledged the shift in workplace dynamics attributed to the new collaborative initiatives Annie had spearheaded. Annie Smith has led this company towards a culture of authenticity and connection, he proclaimed. Her efforts will redefine our approach to leadership at all levels. As applause cascaded around her, something deep within Annie shifted. It was recognition, not merely a pat on the back, but a validation of her journey and growth. She had conquered her doubts and transformed them into strength. She was no longer defined by her past as a receptionist or overshadowed by others' perceptions. She was a recognized leader now. In that instant, as she caught the eye of the CEO, a flicker of confidence surged through her. She had not just learned to lead, she had redefined what leadership meant for herself and her peers. The realization enveloped her like a warm embrace. With time now stretched in the right direction, Annie prepared for another workshop, the final installment of her initiative. Today, she would unveil her plans to elevate their collective discussion into actionable strategies firm-wide. This was a chance not just for her growth, but for everyone to recognize their own potential in the unfolding narrative. You can choose to be vulnerable and authentic in leadership, she would tell them, and together we can chart a path that transforms not just this firm, but the very fabric of how we connect as professionals. Annie paused for a moment, looking into the faces of her colleagues, skeptics who had gradually become allies, supporters who had found their voices, and leaders who were just finding their footing. The room was filled with possibility. She was ready for the future. The internal clash of self-doubt no longer shadowed her path. She had certainly overcome the barriers, proving not to others, but to herself that she was deserving of love, respect, and recognition. The clock ticked softly. Time for her to come full circle, but with a firm stride toward leadership. Transformative action awaited not just her growth, but the growth of an entire organization. She stepped back to lead the transformation, confident in her worth and the lesson she realized. Courage is not the absence of doubt, but the determination to move forward regardless of it. Now was her moment. Join the journey and support these incredible stories of transformation. You need to subscribe now to ensure you never miss another inspiring tale that could change your life. Leave a like now to help spread these powerful messages. Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. Let's connect. And don't wait even one more second to share this uplifting narrative with at least 5 friends who crave motivation to pursue their dreams.